Hmm. Drama flavor. That's my favorite type of flavor for this type of things, because what we have what we have today to talk about is the announcement, or actually never mind, it's not even an announcement at the moment. Blizzard hasn't even said anything. It's more likely a data mining of this thing known as the Corcoran Werewolf to be possibly soon shipping up on the trading post. Now, why is this relevant and why is this getting some players triggered? Or at the very least, it started a debate on the matter because it's an exclusive type of mount, a limited type of mount. Now, on the trading post, we have gotten limited mounts before, like for example, the Cinder Flame Charger, which was from the Recruit a Friend. It was the last tier of mount from the Recruit a Friend system, not something that many players had, and it wasn't available to anyone who didn't entertain that system, and now you can just hop by the trading post and buy it just fine with your tendies. Now, the Corcoran Werewolf has gotten players a bit more angered because this is from a PvE achievement, in particular from Ahead of the Curve. So if we prop up our achievements and we look for like Garrosh maybe, do we have some Garrosh here? There we go. When you do this achievement, you get your Corcoran Werewolf, which is now no longer available, of course, because the Ahead of the Curve achievement is only limited to the tier in which you have that piece of content available. So once the tier goes away, you lose the ability to pick up this mount, just like the tier after, or I think the next expansion, I think, in Legion, you could have gotten this, or you could have gotten this one. I think this was BFA maybe, I don't even remember. But all of these things are Ahead of the Curve mounts, right? So they are limited to PvE achievements, you can't get them anymore, etc, etc. So the fact that we might have the Corcoran Werewolf might mean that we can just expect perhaps Blizzard to start testing the waters with introducing other Ahead of the Curve type mounts to show up on the trading post. This has, of course, caused quite a lot of a debate on the matter, right? Because up to a certain point, most of the debate was laughing, making fun of all of the players who spent millions of gold or hundreds of thousands or had any type of trading around the trading card game mounts, right? Those limited exclusive mounts, which have been, a few of them have been added to the trading post. But many players were like, well, I mean, that's just gold. You know, those mounts might have even been rare, might have even been difficult to find, but all you had to do was spend money, spend gold, right? That's it. You cannot spend gold to buy yourself something like the Corcoran Werewolf. Technically, you could have spent gold in Mists of Pandaria to buy yourself a carry for this mount, but besides that, you can't actually buy them for money. They required you to put some effort, to put some time into progressing your character, to join very likely a guild, to start raiding, get to the last boss, defeat the last boss, and get the mount. Now, at the moment, the sides of the debate are playing out a game of tennis, a game of table tennis. They're essentially just throwing the ball back to each other with the same argument. One side is saying this mount is 10 years old, 10, 12, 14, certain mounts going all the way back to Wrath or Cataclysm, you know. Why do you want them to just sit and rot in your inventory, in your backlog of mounts? I bet players weren't even using this mount even if they had them. Like myself, for example, I don't use this mount, right? So you shouldn't care. You should be fine if this mount is given to players who never had the opportunity to raid, for example, or never raided, for example, in Mists, and can now get it. So they throw the ball on the other side of the court. The other side of the argument says, if we are not supposed to care about this mount, if it's whatever, whether or not this mount is given to players because it doesn't really matter, then why do you care? Why do you want this mount? You just said this mount is 10 years old. You just said nobody should care who gets this mount or not, and why do you want it? You know, there are like 700, 6, 7, 8, whatever 100 mounts in the game. Do you really have to go and pick up this mount that is from 10 years ago? And they throw the ball back to the other side, and this continues to go on and on and on. One side is saying that these mounts represent your memory, your fond memories and experiences in the game, reminding you of when you, for example, in this case, raided with your group of friends all those years ago. Others are saying who cares? They're saying those memories lasted you with this mount for several years. Now why don't you just give this mount to other players who, for example, weren't even playing in Mists of Pandaria and never even had the chance to obtain this mount in the first place. Other people are afraid of accelerationism. Some players are saying, okay, well, Ahead of the Curve is not terribly difficult, it's not like a massive effort, but what if this envelope keeps being pushed and we eventually end up in a discussion about something, for example, like the Black Protodrake? It's another mount that is unavailable. It was removed in 2009, 15 years ago, after the tier of the first season, the first patch of Wrath of the Lich King ended, and you needed to get the meta achievement to earn this mount, and it's been since unavailable. Only the 10-man version of this mount, the Plague Protodrake, found its way a few times in the black market auction house. This one never did. So what if players, if we start giving them the Corcoran Werewolf from Mists, and then we move over to, I think this is BFA, the Mind Borer, and then eventually they keep asking more and we end up getting into much rarer type of mounts like this one. Or what about the Gladiator mounts, even rarer mounts that are removed every season, every time Gladiator changes and the mount changes, the previous Gladiator mount goes away. So you have like 30 plus Gladiator mounts that are exclusive to players who did reach Gladiator, and players might start asking to have those mounts made available through the trading post as well. That is another part of the argument. There are definitely certain mounts which should, even by most players, even if they were exclusive, should be made more available to the player base. For example, things like the Plague Bat. This was just from an event, from a story event in BFA. Why is it still, removed after the story event ended, for example, right? It's also pretty unique in terms of looks. It's just like what you would have seen the next expansion in Shadowlands, the bats from the Ventier rep, but this is also unavailable. You also had other smaller events or things, for example, that were in the in-game shop that were then removed. I don't even remember having these things. I never bought a mount from the shop in my life. I think these came from the 6-month subscription for free, I believe. Those are also now unavailable from the shop. Same goes for other certain events like the Warlord's Death Wheel in, I think, still Mists or Warlords or whatever. These mounts did not actually take much effort, right? It's not that they have been removed after someone took a lot of effort to earn these mounts. These were more or less given to you for free if you just happen to play the game. So those are more understandable to be made available to a larger part of the player base. So most of the argument fall on the type of mounts which were given from effort, from skill, from time consumption and time sink in a certain activity, etc., like in this case, an Ahead of the Curve mount. That's where I wanted to see your guys' opinion on this. Personally, as an owner of many of these mounts, I don't care too much, especially as mentioned, the ones that are not really tied to any type of time consumption or skill requirements, etc. However, there is still the risk. I do acknowledge, even though I'm fine to give out this mount for free, I do acknowledge the thing could get pushed further and further. Players might start asking for more, for even rarer mounts, for Gladiator mounts. You already have plenty of players asking for the Challenger transmog and weapon transmogs from Mists to be made available through the trading post, for example. So there is the risk that even if you start giving out some of the more acceptable freebie mounts, even considering Ahead of the Curve a freebie mount, which is not even that free for many players, we do still have the risk of this starting to snowball out of control and players asking for more and more. Obviously though, my real take would be to be an extremist. I would like every single mount in the game pretty much to be exclusive to a particular patch, not really be available several years in the future. Same goes for titles, for example. I always found it quite fun that someone who started playing in, say, Legion could show up in full tier 2 from vanilla, sporting a Kingslayer title from Wrath of the Lich King while using a mount from defeating a mythic boss from Worlds of Draenor, even though they weren't playing in any single one of those expansions. So if it was for me, it would be even more exclusive in terms of rewards for players. But if we have to stay within the realms of Reality and Blizzard, I do think it's still okay to bring back all their mounts through the trading posts, as long as we don't just get into the nothing is sacred, everything is allowed, every single mount in the game should be available at one point, regardless of how long it took or how hard it was, how difficult it was, or how few players ended up owning those mounts, and just make them available for everyone. I've even heard some degenerates asking for the Kiraji battle mount from the Ankiraji event from basically 20 years ago to be made available to everyone. Have some decency. Treat that as a jewel of the past, as a relic of the past that only a few players got to have, without wanting at all times everything to be available for everyone. There should be a limit. I think we are still within the limit to be asking some ahead of the curve mounts from years ago to become available for most players. As long as we don't go overboard with it, I am fine. That's my take on what to think about this possible, because we are talking about something that isn't even announced officially yet, so it's only a possibility of Blizzard starting to introduce more limited, more exclusive mounts to the trading post system in the near future. Let me guys know what you think about this possibly incoming feature in the trading post, and besides this, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Sunday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, still be given completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, this wasn't the video I was supposed to be making now. Actually, I took a detour. We were supposed to be talking about Mythic Plus, which is what we will see tomorrow, I guess.